Welcome to this presentation on feminist research for WGS 201. This presentation is going to align with your reading of Chapter 7 in terms of thinking about feminist methodologies towards research, and it will also prepare you for thinking about your researched essay assignment, which we will begin the first part of this week in week 11. The objective of this presentation is to examine what a feminist research methodology means or looks like in theory and in practice, to connect this examination of feminist research to help you think about your own interdisciplinary research questions, and to introduce the WGS 201 researched essay assignment. So what is a feminist research methodology? There are two parts to the same interview linked to this slide, and I'd like you may have to pop out of the PowerPoint for a second and then pop back in to view it, even though I've embedded the videos. But I'd like you to look at both of them. It won't take you more than a little bit over 13 minutes. I think that the interviewee does a really good job of talking through the process of feminist research, what it is, what it isn't, and also thinks about it in terms of perspective as much as a methodology. So take a minute and watch these videos and then come back into the PowerPoint. In a 2007 article on feminist research methodologies and development, the authors write that feminist research is not one specific method or combinations of methods, but an approach that is considerate of the multifaceted nature of gender. If we think about the research projects that we may have conducted in the past, say in a composition class, for instance, you often think of a topic and then you research that topic through EKU databases, and then you use that research and compile it and create a thesis based on that research. Feminist research methodologies look at this secondary peer-reviewed research as well, but they also look at primary sources for research, such as interviews or surveys, so that we get a more holistic sense of voices that may not be included in the academy on a particular topic. So there are 5 characteristics of a feminist research methodology or perspective, to borrow from the interview you just watched. It considers hierarchical power relations that recognize gender inequality present in both life and research. It integrates diversity with particular attention to marginalized voices. It analyzes relationships between the researcher and the researched. And this is really important if we think about a feminist research methodology as a focus on perspective, thinking not only about the subject, but the ones who are conducting the research about the subject. The 4th characteristic is using non-traditional qualitative methods. And so we've talked about that in both Chapter 7 and in both the interview that you just watched, that some things are not measurable in a traditional way when we're looking at topics related to WGS. And then finally, adapts quantitative methods to consider hard to measure aspects like women's empowerment or gender-based violence. So turtles, what do turtles have to do with any of this at all? All great discoveries begin with an observation and a related question. Ben Franklin, for instance, observed lightning during a storm and wondered if lightning was an electrical current in nature. Madame Curie wondered about isolating radioactive isotopes, which led to discovering polonium. Galileo questioned whether or not the Earth was the center of the universe, leading to his support of the Copernican system against prevalent political and religious ideology. All of these examples and so many others began with an observation that then led to a question and an investigation. The process of research writing begins with the same steps as the first 3 steps of the scientific method, and really this applies to any discipline or interdisciplinary project. First, it begins with a question, not necessarily a topic, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. Second, you do background research to think about that question further and through different lenses or different perspectives. And third, eventually, after you've asked the question, done background research, and then perhaps re-examined your question or your writing of that question, you can begin to construct a hypothesis or a tentative thesis. It is often a daunting task to think of a topic. The best way to figure this out is not to think of a topic, but to think about your observations. What do you notice? Is there a pattern to what you notice or how you notice things around you? Is something missing that should be there? These don't have to be extraordinary observations. In fact, maybe you're at a football game and you wonder about student athletes. You might ask yourself, do student athletes get paid? How is their university experience different from or similar to your own? You might see a poster for an upcoming movie and wonder about the portrayal of the actress. Why is she wearing that outfit? That costume seems incongruent with the theme. What does the costume say about the society's view of women? Or you might be walking to class and notice a dead turtle next to the road. Here's where the turtle part comes in. How did this turtle die? Where was it going? Where did it come from? All of these examples are not necessarily scientific, but they resemble how good researchers begin good research projects. They each begin with an observation that evolves into a question or multiple questions. But of course, it's not enough to just see a dead turtle and think, I'm going to write about dead turtles. It's important to move beyond your initial observations in order to develop a researchable question. On its own, dead turtles is a dead-end topic. However, your questions about the turtle observation might begin to evolve as you think about them. You might decide that it looked as if the turtle was hit by a car. Then you might begin to wonder about how we might protect turtles and other animals from injury and death. By linking your specific observation with a broader concept, your topic has the potential to become a rewarding research project. A concept is a larger idea that often has implications for a community beyond one's individual observation. Examples of concepts include education, technology, economy and finance, gender, sexuality, and the environment. Concepts often are discipline-based, right? So you might think about history and historical studies as like a concept, or political science as a concept. You can pair an observation-based topic like dead turtles with any of these concepts to create a research question. For example, I wrote one here, dead turtles plus environment equal how does humanity's encroachment on the environment affect reptilian populations such as turtles? Again, I'm going back to that original formula, looking at topic plus concept equals research question, or what I call an RQ. There are numerous possibilities for beginning a research question for this particular topic, or any topic, based on a hypothetical observation of a turtle that I happened to see on the way to class years ago. But it's helpful to practice completing the research question using different concepts until you locate the best direction for your investigation. For WGS 201, I'm going to be asking you to think about observations that you've had that perhaps relate, particularly if you are already in a major, have declared a major, that relate to your major, relate to your discipline of study, your major discipline of study, and how those observations or questions that you have can be informed differently or maybe expanded upon through a WGS lens. So next, after you create your first question, you're going to need to conduct research. Research helps you to revise and develop a specific research question. It's possible that you find overall turtle populations have not changed in the US in the past 10 years, but that in particular regions like Florida, where I used to live, there's been a dramatic decrease in these populations. Then you might need to ask a different but related question. What is significant about these decreased turtle populations in Florida as compared to other regions? Or you might discover that turtles are less adaptive than other reptiles. And this may lead you to research about how other reptilian populations are or are not changing. Some sources might link amphibious population declines to the housing industry or to industrial runoff. This might narrow your focus on dead turtles even further. Whatever you discover, it's important to realize that your research question will evolve over time and that it is normal. As you read and learn more about your topic plus concept, you'll be able to revise your question to address specific concerns. Once your research is complete, you'll begin to think about possible responses to revised research questions, and then you'll be able to conduct or to create a hypothesis or write your thesis. So let's talk about this essay assignment in particular. This comes from the assignment sheet, which is available in this week's module right after you watch this video. I'm going to read the purpose and description to you. In Feminism's Matter, Victoria Bromley argues that, quote, the best people to help us understand marginality are those who are marginalized. Feminist research does not constitute one methodology, but is necessarily interdisciplinary, gathering from multiple sources, primary and secondary, to include voices that may have been left out of previous conversations. So how I handle this is, since in our class and in all WGS 201 classes, a traditional kind of research paper is the assignment, I want us to still think about feminist research and how it is broader than that traditional research piece. And so this is why we do feminist investigations. So I'm reading again from that first paragraph in the middle. While feminist investigations examine primary source perspectives, the researched essay integrates 5 peer-reviewed secondary sources to consider assertions, potential biases, and disciplinary perspectives that may influence these assertions and biases. The research essay is going to be completed in stages with what I call multiple checkpoint assignments, or incremental work for instructor feedback. Yes, it will feel a bit like an English class, like a composition class, but it is WGS research, and we're going to be working through that research process simultaneously. This process was planned to be supported by a library research session and in-class exercises that model expectations and an instructor conference. The instructor conference will still occur whether in person or virtual, depending upon what happens after April 3rd. And I'm going to be providing you links and further information about library research and also other resources that you can use. But of course, at any time, please email me with your questions if something is unclear. You're also encouraged to use resources like the library. You can make an appointment with a librarian virtually or using the chat. And also the Knoll Studio will be conducting online consultations, particularly beginning in week 11 and 12. After gathering, vetting, and organizing your research, you're going to draft, revise, polish, and submit a 5-page paper. It can be a little more if it needs to be, but at least 5 pages, approximately 1,200 to 1,300 words, using the model of formal argument and rubric provided in the assignment sheet, which is again available in this week's module right after you watch this video. While there's no formal presentation requirement, you should be prepared to discuss your research at all stages of the process, and virtually feel free to bring that into your discussion board posts. Also, findings may be integrated into our class manifesto project at the end of the semester, which reflects on connections between our course readings, discussions, and research. So I want to take a look at your tasks and deadlines related to the researched essay for weeks 11 and 12. This week, I'm going to ask you to consider questions from our readings, discussions, and investigations, and then relate these questions to your major field of study, narrowing your options to 1 or 2 questions. You're going to use your responses at the end of the Chapter 7 reading guide to help you brainstorm further. So your first checkpoint assignment is due in week 11, and I ask you to give me 3 potential research questions, or RQs, that are developed from the topic plus concept model. In week 12, I'm going to ask you to begin research part 1, which is where you're going to watch a feminist research instructional video, which you're watching right now, but you're also going to watch some other research materials in week 12. And then you're going to locate and record at least 5 peer-reviewed secondary sources for your project. These can be articles or scholarly book chapters using EKU library bases like JSTOR or Academic Search Complete. Your checkpoint assignment number 2 is going to be a bibliography, a list, not the annotated bibliography that has the paragraph after the works cited list or the source references, but just a list of your 5 secondary sources in MLA or APA format. The reason I want to take a look at this is I want to make sure that you're on the right track with the kinds of sources before you start taking notes and research on those sources. There's nothing worse than being a student and starting to work on a project and realizing that you haven't chosen the appropriate sources for that project. Finally, here are the resource links that I was talking about. If you need to refresh yourself with MLA or APA, you may use either style, by the way, for this project. Here is a link to Al Purdue for both. Also, EKU has library guides, and one of them is for women and gender studies, and you can connect with it here. I ask you to look at it definitely in week 12, but please feel free to look at it beforehand. You may also, there's often a librarian who's specifically linked to our research guide, and you may contact that librarian directly via email or through a library system and see if you can have a virtual consultation if you need one. And then also, the last thing is I mentioned that you can book an online consultation with the Knoll Studio, and here is a link to that. So I look forward to watching your process, and I'm excited to see your RQs this week. If you have any questions, please email me, and I hope you have a wonderful week.